The road to faith. What an adventure is this study of the letter to the Galatians. In its heart is the gospel and our salvation.
And we continue our quest in understanding salvation by faith. But as we started last week, we're trying to understand how and where does the law given by God fits in our Christian experience. And in this lesson, we claim that the law has unquestionable place on our road to faith. What is it? Let's find out.
The analogy with the road is very important. It's a journey, and we can get lost, disoriented, confused, even after we meet Jesus. The good news, though, is that God has mapped the road, and the law has an important role to play.
And Paul continues in verse 21, chapter 3, to make an effort to explain to those of us who are a little bit confused why we live by faith and why at the same time there is a law given by God. And as it sounds right, those two have completely different purposes, two completely different roles to play in our walk with God. The law is there to regulate our life in the covenant that we have in God. However, it doesn't have any ability to make or create life. No spirituality comes from observing the law. And this is where many people stumble. Now, through the experience of faith, we receive the gift from God who grants us life. And again, this is thanks to the faithfulness of Christ in our behalf. So, something that we cannot achieve alone.
This is a very important point. Paul's opponents believe that their obedience to the law can give them spiritual life. And this is a very big mistake. Let's restate this. The law and the promise, they don't contradict, they don't oppose each other. They have different purpose. And only the faithfulness of Jesus can bring life and salvation. From here, the lesson digs into some statements about the law. What does it mean, for example, to be kept under the law?
Yeah. In verse 23 happens something very interesting. Paul says, before faith came, we were under the law. And this is where the writer of the lesson will correct this translation with the original Greek one, which says that before the faith came, we were under the law. And it makes a big difference because it implies that Paul is talking about Jesus coming here, which appears to be a divider of time before and after his coming. We're not talking just about faith in general, but before Jesus came, we were under the law. And the second part of the verse says we were under the law. The lesson digs much deeper in this expression, and you can go and read about it, but somewhere at the end, it brings the verses in 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 21, where its original reads that we as Christians are living within the law, not under the law, within the requirements of the law, of course through our union with Christ.
Under the law may refer to an alternative way of salvation through obedience, which is impossible and is distorting the gospel. And it could also be understood as kind of a prison supervisor, a guardian. It seems that this is more the way where Paul is going.
So why was the law given then at all? A reasonable question once we have discovered that there is no contradiction between faith and law. It has a purpose. And Paul searches for words that can somehow encompass the meaning of the law. And what he finds are words like a guard. The law is a guard or a guardian or a tutor, a schoolmaster.
In the center of sin is this thinking that we can do fine on our own, that we can be like God. The law in itself is not a curse, it's a blessing. It can't provide life or salvation, but it can point us to the only source for that. And its principles are also protecting us.
The lesson talks how in ancient times Romans were given a special designated slave who was given the authority to look after the master's sons. The list of his job description began with him preparing the bath, ensuring that the sons have food and clothing, making sure that they went to school and they did their homework, and also that they learn the values of the society. They live them and they practice them. This disciplinarian, being kind but at the same time strict and firm, looked after the kids from the age of 6 till the age of maturity. So can you imagine what this child would look like when grown up if there was no such guardian or instructor or pedagogue or disciplinarian? And I believe that Paul found a very good fit of such a function when compared to the purpose of the law.
This guardian pedagogue had a very important role to play while maturing. And it's the same way for the law to lead us to God. The question is not, should we obey the law? Does it have any role to play anymore? Is it needed anymore? But it's about being delivered from the condemnation, about being freed by grace, about living a life with God and letting His character, His law, being reflected in us, being written in our hearts. It's a radical change.
In conclusion, we can say that the law continues to have a part of our road to faith. It has its own purpose, a part and different from having the ability to make life or to inspire spirituality. This continues and remains only a prerogative of God and the inspiration of His sacrifice on the cross. We will continue next week with the lesson from slaves to heirs.